Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. I read 6 books this month and 2 of them were rereads, so I'll start with those. Quickly, I wanted to just shout out Michael from Catalyst Reads. He's doing kind of a year-long rereadathon, and I'll have the video that talks about that linked down below if you're interested. It's going to be all year long. He has challenges, but you're open to either do those challenges or not. You can do whatever you want, but I think it's a great motivator for rereading books. And so I started the month off with rereading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and this is a book that's always been an all-time favorite for me, one of my favorite reads as a kid, and it's been a really long time since I've read this book. I want to say more than 15 years. I listened to the audiobook. I'll have all the information about the audiobook down in the description box. This is a story of 4 sisters. They're very close, and I enjoyed hearing about all the different funny scrapes that each of the sisters get into. I love their personalities. They're very distinct, and you kind of see the sisters grow up and become Little Women. So that's what the book is about, and it's just a very cozy read, perfect for winter. The next one that I reread was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the master. I buddy read this with Kristen, Amanda, and Hillary here on BookTube. I'll have all of their channels linked down below, and I had a blast buddy reading this with them. This is the story of the Buendia family. Jose Arcadio and Ursula have children, and over 100 years and various generations, you kind of see the family living in this mythical town, Camocondo. You kind of see their lives, and it becomes clear over time that the family is either cursed or following their fate over and over and over again. The difficulty in this book is that a lot of the characters have the same names, so you have to either check the family tree in the front to keep track of everybody or just take notes if you want to. This is my second read, so it was a little bit easier for me to keep track of everything the second time around. There's tons of magical realism, symbolism, irony, humor. All of that is part of the story. It's just Marquez writing about 100 years of solitude and how every family member deals with solitude in a different way. That's the most simplest way that I can describe this book, because there's a ton going on. I was even telling the girls that I wish I would have taken a college course on this book, because there's just so much to get into, and there's so many things that you can miss if you're not paying attention. But it's still a huge favorite of mine, probably one of my top 3 favorite books of all time. The next one I want to talk about is a book that I actually own. Everything else that I'm going to talk about in this video is either at the library or as an audiobook, and that's The War of the End of the World by Mario Vargas Llosa. And I just did a book review on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. This is a story, well, it's a novelization of a real conflict that occurred in the early 19th century in Brazil, about a man named the Counselor, who was believed to be sent by God, and he amasses thousands of followers, and they settle in a place called Canudos, and they decide to live their own type of life, a more simpler life based on the counselor and his teachings. They don't believe in money, they don't believe in the census, they don't believe in the government really, and so the government of Brazil has an issue with this and tries and fails to get rid of them, so they fight back, and that's kind of what this book is about in its simplest terms. But it's 600 pages, so there's a lot more going on in this book, but I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was masterfully done, but I did have some issues with it, and like I said, I'll go into more detail in my book review. The next one I want to talk about is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is a story that opens with an unnamed narrator who is going to visit her boyfriend's parents, and on the long car ride to her boyfriend's parents, she is thinking of ending things. Like with all relationships, her and Jake have had their ups and downs, but she's really thinking that their relationship has run its course, and she's gonna tell him that she's ready to end things. That's all that you need to know going into this book. It's a very short book, so it's a quick read, and it quickly becomes apparent that something is just off. There are italicized parts kind of interwoven in the story every couple of chapters, and it's a conversation between 2 people, and something has happened that's very brutal and gruesome. So that also adds to the mystery of what you're reading, because you're going back and forth between this italicized conversation and the narrator and Jake's journey. I had to reread the ending of this book twice to really get it. Without spoiling anything, it's just a book that will leave you asking a lot of questions. You're going to be kind of second guessing everything that you just read, and so that made it for a fun reading experience. That said, I think that the ending is going to divide a lot of people, and this is the type of book that you either are going to love it or hate it. I was in the camp that I loved it. I thought it was very unique, and I'm very interested to see what else this author is going to write. I think this is his debut novel, so it's very promising, and that's always exciting. Next, I want to talk about The Paris Wife by Paula McLain, and I read this for my book club, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was narrated by Carrington McDuffie. This is a story about Ernest Hemingway's first marriage to a woman named Hadley. In the early 1920s, they get married and they move to Paris, where Ernest is trying to get his writing career off the ground. And it's really a story about their relationship, the beginning and the end. I thought the writing was great, perfect for the type of story that you're reading. However, I just could not deal with this relationship. It's a very dysfunctional relationship. Ernest Hemingway reads like a very whiny, arrogant prick, and Hadley kind of feels like this submissive, naive woman that has no idea what she's getting herself into. They're not right for each other at all. The relationship kind of gets to this point of no return, and I think that was a very common thread in a lot of Hemingway's relationships, but I really enjoyed how it was written overall. I just did not like the relationship. It kind of ruined everything else for me. The next book I want to talk about is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, and this was an audiobook that I listened to. It was narrated by Barbara Caruso, and I thought the audiobook was great. This was one of those very highly anticipated reads for me. I had really high hopes for this, and I had been recommended to read this book so many times because I love memoirs. This is the memoir about Joan Didion's year after her husband suddenly passes away. They were married a very long time, and so she talks about their marriage and their careers and their family life with their daughter. And then she kind of goes over the year following his death. I felt like this was Joan Didion writing through her grief. She was trying to grapple and understand what really happened. She explains about the circumstances surrounding her husband's death, and then she just shares what it feels like to suddenly not have that person that you've always had next to you, what it feels like when they're no longer there. While I was reading this or listening to this, it's so clear to me that Didion is such an intelligent and a very skilled writer. There are some very beautiful passages in this book. However, she looks at things a little more like in an abstract way, or more logical rather than emotional, more scientific ways about grief rather than more emotional ways about grief. And so it almost felt like she was a little bit distant from me, the reader. And I guess that's not what I was expecting when I was thinking about this book. I thought that this would be a book where Didion would be very vulnerable and open and a little bit more emotional, I guess. But Didion is clearly not an emotional type of person. I mean, everybody deals with grief differently. Everybody has their own unique way of dealing with loss. And so I'm not going to fault her for writing the memoir the way that she did. I guess I was just expecting her to really go there. And I had that expectation the whole book. And she never really goes there emotionally. And so that was a little bit of a letdown for me. But I definitely will be trying more books by Didion. I'm really excited to kind of dive into her other books. I know she's written a lot of memoirs or books about her life in California and things like that, and so I'm very interested in those. So overall, I enjoyed it. It just wasn't what I expected. So those are all the books that I read in January. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these and what you thought about them, or if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts, or if you have any recommendations for me. I'd love to hear about them below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.